In the 1980s, Pembrokeshire was haunted by a series of brutal murders. At the centre stood John Cooper, the man later dubbed the Bullseye Killer, whose crimes would take decades to solve. Hello, welcome to Cold Case UK. John William Cooper was born on 3rd September 1944 in Milford Haven, a small coastal town in Pembrokeshire, in the southwest corner of Wales. He grew up in the local community, left school at the age of 15, and drifted between manual jobs. He trained briefly in upholstery and carpentry. He worked in fields and on farms as a casual labourer, a familiar face in the farming community of Pembrokeshire. He later worked as a welder's mate at the Gulf Oil Refinery in Milford Haven. He was, to those who knew him, an ordinary man. In 1966, Cooper married a woman named Patricia. They had known each other since they were 12 years old. They married on 11th of July, 1966. Together they had 2 children, a son named Adrian, later known as Andrew, and a daughter named Teresa. To the outside world, they were a normal family. Behind closed doors, it was a different story. Cooper was violent and controlling. He was physically abusive toward his son. According to Andrew, who later gave evidence against his father, Cooper once pointed a loaded gun at him when he was 11 years old and pulled the trigger. The gun was empty. Andrew left home at the age of 15. In 1978, something happened that briefly transformed Cooper's circumstances. He entered a national newspaper Spot the Ball competition and won £90,000 and an Austin Princess car. It was a life-changing sum of money for a farm labourer from Pembrokeshire. He gave £1,000 each to 10 family members. He took Patricia on a luxury holiday to the United States. He set up a small holding for the family. For a time, it seemed as though his luck had turned. It did not last. Cooper had a serious gambling problem. He spent heavily in pubs and betting shops. Friends recalled watching him lose £1,000 on a single horse race. The winnings were gone. By the early 1980s, the money had disappeared entirely. Cooper turned to burglary. He was a prolific thief, operating across a wide area of Pembrokeshire, entering homes at night, wearing a balaclava, armed with a sawn-off shotgun. He knew the local fields, the paths, the lanes. He knew which properties were isolated. He knew the terrain better than almost anyone. In December 1985, John Cooper committed his first known murders. On 22nd December 1985, 3 days before Christmas, Cooper targeted a 3-story Georgian manor house at Scoveston Park near Milford Haven. The property belonged to Richard Thomas, age 58, and his sister Helen Thomas, age 54. They were wealthy landowners. They lived together in the large house. Cooper knew them. He had worked as a farm labourer in the area. Richard Thomas had sold hay to Cooper on more than one occasion, though the two had argued aggressively about the price. Helen Thomas was alone in the house when Cooper broke in. According to the prosecution at his eventual trial, Helen likely disturbed Cooper during the burglary. He tied her with black rope and shot her in the head. Richard Thomas was not at home when his sister was killed. He returned home while Cooper was still inside. Cooper shot him too. He then poured diesel through the house and set it on fire, burning Scoveston Park to the ground in an attempt to destroy every trace of what he had done. Flames were seen coming from the direction of the house at around 11 o'clock that night. By the time fire crews arrived, the building was already engulfed. Richard Thomas's body was recovered from the front of the burning manor in the early hours of 23rd December. Helen Thomas's body was not recovered until 10 o'clock the following morning, found beneath the collapsed floor of an upper bedroom. So badly burned she was barely recognizable. A large police investigation followed. Officers conducted door-to-door inquiries across the area. The Cooper family home was among those visited. Cooper told his son, who was a child at the time, to tell police the family had all been home together that night. The alibi held. No one was charged. The investigation lost momentum. The murders at Scoveston Park went unsolved. 3.5 years passed. On 28 May 1989, John Cooper appeared as a contestant on Bullseye, the popular ITV darts and general knowledge game show hosted by comedian Jim Bowen. He sat across from the host with a mullet hairstyle and a mustache, and spoke quietly about his love of scuba diving along the Pembrokeshire coastline. He described the beauty of the local waters. He was eliminated in the first round, failing to answer enough general knowledge questions correctly. He went home. 1 month later, he killed again. On 29th June 1989, Peter Dixon and his wife Gwenda Dixon were on the last day of their annual summer holiday in Pembrokeshire. Peter was 51 years old, a marketing manager and keen marathon runner. Gwenda was 52, a secretary and badminton player. They came from Witney in Oxfordshire. They had been coming to Pembrokeshire every summer for approximately 15 years. It was a place they loved. They were staying at Howlston Farm Caravan Park near the village of Little Haven. That morning, on the last day of their holiday, they zipped up their tent, left their red Ford Sierra in the car park, and set off for a final walk along the Pembrokeshire coastal path. They told fellow campers they were going for one last walk before heading home to Oxfordshire. They were never seen alive again. John Cooper was waiting for them on the path. He was dressed in black, wearing a balaclava and carrying a sawn-off shotgun. He forced the couple to the ground and tied them up. He demanded Peter's bank card and forced him to reveal his PIN number. Later that day, Cooper used the card to withdraw £300 from ATMs across the local area. He then marched Peter and Gwenda to an isolated spot near the cliff edge and shot them both at point-blank range. Peter was shot 3 times, including once in the head. Gwenda was shot twice. Cooper reloaded his weapon during the attack. Gwenda was sexually assaulted. Peter's wedding ring was taken from his finger. Gwenda's wedding ring was later sold by Cooper for £25. Cooper concealed the bodies beneath thick undergrowth near the cliff edge, jamming broken branches and ferns into the ground to hide them from view. 6 days later, on 5th July 1989, a police dog handler noticed swarms of flies and a strong smell near the cliff path. The decomposing bodies of Peter and Gwenda Dixon were found hidden in the undergrowth. Peter's hands were still tied behind his back. Gwenda's body was partly unclothed. The investigation that followed was the largest murder inquiry Pembrokeshire had ever seen. Police gathered thousands of witness statements. Ballistics analysis confirmed that the shotgun pellets recovered from the Dixons matched those from the 1985 Thomas murders at Scofeston Park. The same weapon, the same killer. But investigators could not identify who that killer was. Despite everything, John Cooper was not charged. The case went cold. In March 1996, Cooper attacked a group of 5 teenagers in a wooded area behind the Mount Estate in Milford Haven. He approached them wearing a balaclava and fired a warning shot into the air with a shotgun. He then attacked 2 teenage girls before fleeing the scene. No one was caught. Later that same year, Cooper was interrupted during a burglary and fled, throwing items of clothing and equipment into a nearby hedge as he ran. Police searching the area found a shotgun and a balaclava. Officers knocking on doors in the vicinity came to Cooper's home. Inside, they discovered thousands of stolen items, ropes, jewelry, ammunition, hundreds of keys taken from properties across the region, and a sawn-off shotgun. In 1998, John Cooper was convicted of 30 burglaries and 1 violent armed robbery. He He was sentenced to 16 years in prison. While he was imprisoned, police questioned him about the murders of the Thomas siblings and the Dixons. Cooper denied everything. Investigators knew he would never confess. If he was ever going to face justice for the 4 murders, the evidence would have to do the talking. In January 2006, police launched Operation Ottawa, a dedicated cold case review into the unsolved double murders of 1985 and 1989. The review was led by Detective Superintendent Steve Wilkins. Wilkins believed John Cooper was responsible for both sets of murders and was determined to prove it before Cooper was released from prison. Wilkins brought in LGC Forensics, a private forensic science company. Professor Angela Gallup, the company's Director of Science and Innovation, led the forensic re-examination. Her team worked through over 3,000 exhibits that had been seized from Cooper's home during the 1990s. They examined gloves, clothing, ropes, and the shotgun that had been recovered from a hedgerow after Cooper abandoned it during a failed robbery. The breakthrough came in 2 stages. Underneath a coat of black paint that Cooper had applied to his sawn-off shotgun after the Dixon murders, forensic scientists found a spot of blood. It matched Peter Dixon. Then came the shorts. When Cooper had been arrested for the burglaries in 1998, police had seized a pair of khaki shorts from his bedroom. Patricia Cooper, not knowing what they were or where they had come from, had at some point altered the shorts by taking up the hem. In doing so, she had unknowingly sealed a microscopic drop of blood inside the folded fabric. When scientists examined the hem, they found the blood. It matched Peter Dixon. Inside the seam of the same shorts, scientists also found a trace of DNA. It matched the DNA profile of the Dixons' daughter, Julie. Julie had been in Cyprus at the time of her parents' murders. There was only one explanation for her DNA to be present on those shorts. The shorts had belonged to the Dixons. Cooper had taken them from the scene after shooting Peter and Gwenda and worn them as his own. Patricia had altered them without ever knowing what they were. Detective Superintendent Wilkins later said of Pat Cooper's unknowing contribution to the case, "It is absolutely incredible to think that her simple act would lead to him finally facing justice. There was one more piece of evidence that would prove decisive. When investigators were researching Cooper's background, journalist Jonathan Hill of ITV News, who had been working closely with the Operation Ottawa team, asked an ITV archivist to search through the archive of Bullseye episodes until they found Cooper's appearance. They found it. The episode had been recorded on 28th May 1989, exactly 1 month before the Dixon murders. Wilkins watched the footage. He saw John Cooper sitting across from Jim Bowen, describing the Pembrokeshire coastline, talking about scuba diving in the very waters near where he would kill Peter and Gwenda Dixon 4 weeks later. And then investigators placed the Bullseye footage side by side with the police photo-fit sketch that had been compiled from witness descriptions of a man seen using Peter Dixon's bank card at ATMs on the day of the murders. The match was extraordinary. Wilkins later wrote, "In my 30 years of service, I had seen many artists' impressions and photo-fit efforts, but I had never seen as close a match as this." John Cooper was arrested on 13th May 2009 at his home in Letterston, near Fishguard in Pembrokeshire. He had been released from prison on licence just months earlier, in 2008. On the night of his release from prison, Patricia Cooper died of natural causes at home. Detective Superintendent Wilkins later said that in his personal view, Pat Cooper had simply given up, unable to face living with her husband again. Cooper was charged with both double murders, the rape and sexual assault of the teenagers in 1996, and related offences. The trial began on 21st March 2011 at Swansea Crown Court. The The prosecutor was Gerard Elias QC. The trial lasted 9 weeks. The jury heard the full weight of the forensic evidence. They saw the bullseye footage placed alongside the police photo fit. They heard from Cooper's own son, Andrew, who testified against his father. They heard from the teenage survivors of the 1996 attack. During the trial, Cooper shouted from the dock, attempting to correct witnesses and challenge the prosecution. When the evidence about the rape conviction was announced, Cooper turned to the jury foreman and shouted the word rubbish. He had shown no emotion until that moment. The jury deliberated for 3 days. On 26th of May 2011, John William Cooper was convicted of all charges: the murders of Richard Thomas and Helen Thomas in 1985, the murders of Peter Dixon and Gwenda Dixon in 1989, the rape of a 16-year-old girl, the sexual assault of a 15-year-old girl, and related offences. Judge John Griffith Williams sentenced Cooper to a whole life order. He would never be released. The judge said the murders were of such evil wickedness that the mandatory sentence of life will mean just that. Cooper appealed his conviction in 2012. The appeal was rejected. In 2023, Cooper lodged a further application with the Criminal Cases Review Commission. That application remains ongoing. He has never shown remorse. He has never admitted to anything. As of 2026, John William Cooper is 81 years old and remains in prison serving a whole life order. Peter Dixon was 51 years old. Gwenda Dixon was 52. They had come to Pembrokeshire every summer for 15 years because they loved the coastline and the quiet. On the last morning of their last holiday, they went for a walk and did not come back. Richard Thomas was 58 years old. Helen Thomas was 54. They lived together at their family home in the Pembrokeshire countryside. On the 22nd of December, 1985, 3 days before Christmas, a man who had worked in the fields nearby broke into their home and killed them both. John Cooper knew Pembrokeshire better than almost anyone. He knew its paths, its fields, its cliffs, its people. He used that knowledge to hunt and kill. It took over 20 years. A forensic team working through 3,000 exhibits, a coat of black paint on a buried shotgun, a microscopic drop of blood sealed inside a folded hem, and a television game show recorded 1 month before a double murder to finally stop him. Hello everyone, thank you for listening, and drop any feedback below. I'd love to hear your thoughts. And I hope to see you again in the next case, right here on Cold Case UK.